Welcome to Cold War Conversations, the home of real stories of the Cold War.
One of the rare occasions I was knocked out of my bunk by an ex-Prime Minister. Anyway, the hatch stove in and the water started coming down, and being an ex-submariner, I wasn't too keen on the roof leaking. You never like the roof leaking in submarines.
This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to first-hand Cold War history accounts. Do make sure you follow us in your podcast app so that you don't miss out on future episodes. David recounts his experiences sailing with former British Prime Minister Edward Heath, offering a glimpse into the life of a man who once led a nation. From the camaraderie on board to the challenges faced during the races, David's anecdotes paint a vivid picture of life at sea. But it is the 1979 Fastnet Race that stands as a centrepiece of this episode, a maritime disaster marked by perilous storms and the resilience of the human spirit. David's first-hand account is both harrowing and inspiring. I'm delighted to welcome David Arnold back to our Cold War conversation.
Next to me after Valiant, I went into an engineering firm, inspection, and then they funded me to take an MA in Management Studies at Sussex University. And I did it in Management Studies down at Brighton, and I came top of the class, and so I got an extra couple of terms to do the MA at Sussex Uni. And then I got a job as finance director of another engineering company, and we prospered, did very well, and in the end ended up by my wife and myself owning most of it. It's quite a big company. We had 33 factories at the end, freehold.
Wow.
And a lot of them on lease, but we occupied about 6 or 7. Light engineering, sheet metal work, all round Sussex, fairly small. But the main factory employed 300. It wasn't that small. And anyway, we prospered and what have you. But I was a member of Lloyd'S, and unfortunately lost a big heap of money. So we had to sell up and pay. Lloyd's is pretty unforgiving. And so I set up as a company doctor, age 49. Who's going to employ? Nobody employ me anyway, for goodness sake. Too bloody difficult. And so we set up as a company doctor, and we had a yacht.
Wow.
All in all.
Wow.
I say we've had it all in our cab in our time. Yeah. And I did a lot of offshore ocean racing. At the time, it was an amateur sport. And the Admiral's Cup was the World Championship of offshore sailing in those days. And I sailed with de Savary, I sailed with Robin Asia, and I also sailed with Edward Heath. Robin Asia took Peter Nicholson, who was Heath's navigator, on board. I got the sack, which is a shame because we won the Admiral's Cup the previous year. And so Peter Nicholson was Edward Heath's second navigator. His first one, dead now, was Anthony Churchill, who won the Sydney Hobart with Heath. And we were in the same team, but we weren't on Morning Cloud. We were on Yeoman 20 at the time. Got dinner at Checkers and everything. And so I wrote to Edward Heath.
This was while Heath was still Prime Minister.
73 was while he was Prime Minister, but at the time I turned up at the scene, 79, he was Sir Edward Heath, Prime Minister retired. And so since Peter Nicholson, his second navigator, joined Robin Asia, out of interest they didn't get into the Admiral's Cup that year, which pleased me no end. Morose in victory. Whatever it is. Evil in defeat. Anyway, I wrote to Edward Heath and said, I understand that you need a navigator, sir, and I'm a navigator with a ship to navigate. So up I went, up to the Houses of Parliament, place next door where old Heath hung out. met our MP there, and he said, "What are you doing up here, David?" I said, "I'm here to see Edward Heath." Shut him up for a while. Had a chat to Edward Heath, and I was navigator Morning Cloud. And the two Fastnets beforehand, the 75 and the 77 one, were pretty calm. Not much wind, but calm fleets and what have you, drifting around. And so everybody invited their aunties or barmaid of the local pub, all kinds of people. They said, "This Fastnet carries this great kudos. It's a doddle. We've done it twice now. It's no problem at all. Bring your deck chair," kind of thing. And of course, the 79 Fastnet was anything but a dozzle. And so we did the 79 Fastnet, and we got caught off the Lombardy Bank. And you'll appreciate that as the sea shallows like a bank, the amplitude of the waves increases and the pitch decreases. In other words, you're out at sea and you get a big long wave, maybe 3/4 of a mile apart, might be 50 or 60 feet high, but you steam down one and steam along and steam up the other one. And although it's not very pleasant, but when it goes over a bank, of course, the waves ramp up another 10 or 15 feet and the pitch shortens, so you're down at the bottom, you can't hear a thing, and there's a wall of water coming up over the top of the jib that looks as if it's going to swap the boat. And we rounded the Fastnet. I've still got the logbook. Excuse me a minute, because I bought it out because I know where it is. I'll tell you. Yes. This is the original logbook. The Wikipedia got it wrong. They said we didn't finish. And we did.
Well, you can always go in and edit that entry.
Yeah,
maybe get one of your...
It's been edited. If you bear with me for 1 second. That's the 79. I don't know if you can read it, but that's the 79 Fastnet. A lot of it's scribbled of necessity.
Yeah. Well, and also you're on not a very big boat either, so you're rolling around while you're writing it.
42 feet, yeah.
So you were on the Fastnet race in 79. Could you take me through what happened with that?
Well,
and your experiences?
We had 10 crew. Did I send you a picture of it? I'll dig a picture out of the crew. And of whom, I think 6 are dead now, including Edward Heath, Owen Parker, who's the captain. So it's worth recording this because, you know, I'm coming 85, and there aren't many of them left alive that I know of. And we started off. You've got the dates we started off, and the weather forecasts we got from what used to be the light program, you know, the 10 to 6 one. I remember listening to 10 to 6, and they used to play the music of sailing for the one at 5 to 12 or 20 to 12, forget the times now. Always remember the 10 to 6, because it was followed by the news. So I'd sit on the chart table with Edward Heath. You know, we'd sit together and I'd note down the forecasts and the areas and everything. And then they go on the news. You get the bong, bong, bong of Big Ben. And you'd say, "Mrs. Thatcher, in a speech today," "Turn off that rubbish," said he. So off, didn't hear the news, we missed that. And each forecast, it was a sad thing. There is a report, I've got the report here somewhere, but there is a report that was done. The sad thing was, each forecast, they forecast something that was milder than was going to happen, and then within an hour or so, a new forecast would come, but not be broadcast, which showed rapidly worsening weather. The next forecast was worse than the previous one, and then an hour or so later, it got a lot worse. So we didn't know nobody really knew what the weather was like. So Maurice Lang did a forecast, which I got somewhere the other day. Oh, there she is. There she is. There she is. That was the Fastnet Race inquiry.
Right.
And that's, if you want to know about it, that's worth a read. Royal Ocean Racing Club. So, we got to the Fastnet. I've got the time there, but it was in the middle of the night. And of course, for me, I was taking console bearings, which is another hyperbolic navigation system, long out of use now, of course, but it's on GPS. But I was taking console bearings, so we were fairly sure of our position. And we got to the Fastnet. It was about 2 a.m. First boats round at about midnight. The big ones, the big American ones. And it was blowing 9 to 10. That is severe gale force 9. Storm force 10, and the crew were all on the rail, but we've all done a lot of Fastnet races, we've all done a lot of rough weather work, and it didn't worry us. We could sail in force 10, we had 3 reefs in the main and a storm jib up, and we turned round to head for the Bishop Rock, which was the next mark off the Isles of Scilly. And I went to bed because my job was over. I got them to Fastnet, 150 miles the Isles of Scilly. And so you know, I didn't have much to do. I could get a decent sleep. Now, I wasn't on a watch before I started taking radio bearings and going back on console things and plotting us into the Bishop Rock and going around the bottom of the Isles of Scilly. And my bunk was on the port side, aft. We had the nav console was forward of us. And Heath was on the starboard side, aft. So he slept over there, I slept over there, and I was on the downside, but it didn't really matter too much because, you know, the watch was on deck and the wind was more or less astern by this stage. And if not astern, it was on the starboard quarter. So we were racing along, and I lay down to go to sleep. Unbeknownst to anybody but one or two of us, we had a big chap there called Pat Lilly. He was the paid hand at the time. He ended up running Camper and Nicholson's, but he was the paid hand at the time, Pat Lilly. And he'd been dancing on the after hatch, and he'd bust it, and there wasn't time to get the after hatch fixed, so we got a shipyard to put a bit of plastic in there, big bit of plastic sheeting, which wasn't quite the same as a proper hatch, but at least kept the water out. So when we got down to Labadi Bank and the seas got pretty dreadful, the boat got rolled right over until the masts went under the water, which took off all the wind gauges and everything, dipped the VHF in, and it bent the wheel, which was in a trough, knocked down some of the rail, and 3 of the crew went overboard, fortunately on lines. They were clipped onto lines and harness, so we got them back. We went right over. Heath came up out of his bunk, which was now vertically above me, hit my bunk, which was on a pole. I was on the downside, and knocked me out of my bunk, which is one of the rare occasions I was knocked out of my bunk by an ex-Prime Minister. Anyway, the hatch stove in, and the water started coming down, and being an ex-submariner, I wasn't too keen on the roof leaking. Never liked the roof leaking in submarines. And I remember my late mother saying, "I expect you helped Mr. Heath up." And I thought to myself, I think I'd trodden his head as I got out of it. Went up the hatch. But anyway, there I was up the hatch. And I sat with Pat Lilly, who was a good 16 stone, big man. I was a big man. And shrinking now. Way it goes. Another 10 years, I'll disappear. And it's true, actually. I was 6'3.5", and now I'm just 6 foot. It's shrink. Anyway, so we sat in the little well there. We got the rest of the crew aboard, one of them, Chris Moody, wouldn't come on deck. He sat below. He never did come on deck. And, even when the weather was fine and we were all sitting underpants drying our gear. And every time a big wave came, it washed Pat and I, good 32 stone between us, out of there and hard against what was left of the rails. And when you were down in the dip between the waves were way up by the mast. When you looked up, it went all quiet. Everything was quiet because the wind was shielded by the waves. And I remember thinking, if I'm going to die here, I think I've said this before to you, but if I'm going to die here, why can't I go home for a couple of weeks and get all the bloody paperwork done? I think what's collected on my desk there, somebody's got to deal with that. Anyway, I was not mysteriously transported, and up the wave we went, and then all hell was let loose. And we hove to. He said, "What do we do, David?" And I said, "We hove to, so we've got to hove to." So we took the main down and put up a storm sail. We managed that, took the jib down and just hove to and battened down. And it was half full of water. And after about 2.5, 3 hours, we got going again. It eased off. The storm had passed. It was a very narrow storm. And we got going again. Boat was half full of water. And I wasn't seasick. I've never really been seasick. Never affected me. And one of the problems was that the bilges were used to stow nuts and crisps and things, raisins and the sort of thing that built you up. It's an aluminium boat, and it was also used to stow batteries. And the batteries had inverted. So you've got aluminium, sulfuric acid, some, and nuts and raisins and rotten, soaked cartons, bits of blocking up the bilge pump. So Mr. E said to me, well, the first thing he said was, "Can you sew up my leg?" And he had a triangular cut in his leg. And so there's a bit of white piping came out of it. I didn't quite know what that was, so I tucked it back in and put a few homeward bounders in from the medical kit. Later, when we got in, my father-in-law, the surgeon, said that's the worst bit of sewing I've ever seen in all my time in medicine. And I said, "It's all right for you. You don't rock about in your bloody operating theatre with people pouring water all over you." Anyway, I wrote that and got a letter in the Telegraph a year or two back on that. Brilliant. So Edward Heath said, "We're sailing along, but the boat's half full of water and the bilge is full of all this shit, and we can't pump it all out." So he said, "Do you think you could clear that out?" And I said, "Well, yes, I think I can, sir." I said, "If they've got a bucket up top on a rope, I'll fill the buckets. And if they take it up and dump it, we'll get it empty." And he said, "Oh, I tell you what," he said, "I'll make the cocoa while you clear it out." I reminded him of this three months before he died at the Royal Southern. We made a speech. I made a speech, and the Commodore did, and the Royal Southern and the Heath made a speech. Interesting, actually, very prescient. 3 months before he died. Anyway,
wow.
This was my speech, which got him going like this. Anyway, there am I down below, with my hands scraping up all this shit, putting it in a bucket, and got a scoop, got some water, scraped, cleared the bilge pump, cleared the bilges, got a rag, cleaned it all up, got the batteries there, topped them up with distilled water. My hands were going a bit red because of all the sulfuric acid. Meanwhile, forward up at the, well, it wasn't really a galley, but it had a kettle, and he was plonking away with the cocoa. And so I finished, and I said, all finished. Put the floorboards back, bilges pumped, all clean, batteries done, went forward. All done, sir. I said, "Where's my cocoa?" Oh, he said, "All the makings are over there." I said, "For fuck's sake, do you really think that you won't supposed to make me bloody cocoa. I said I did all the shitty jobs and you said you'd make the... All right, he said, all right, David, I'll do it. He's down there making cocoa. I reminded him of that before he died. And he was sitting there, sort of, his shoulders going, he loved that one.
Yeah, that was his signature, wasn't it? When he laughed, his shoulders would move.
Do that.
Yeah. Wow.
And
well, so you lost. Go on.
Sorry, you. So
I was going to say, so you've lost radio contact. So you've got no.
Yeah.
Wait.
Well, then, of course, I, being navigator as radio officer, the VHF was sort of dripping gently, which we only had a little grey VHF. We didn't have any special gear at this stage. He being ex-Prime Minister as opposed to Prime Minister. When he was Prime Minister, they had all kinds of shortwave stuff on there to talk to the world, press the button on a nuclear submarine or something. But, well, I don't know what he had, but not in my time. Yeah. But we only had an ordinary VHF, and it had a good soaking. And so we let it drip dry a bit, and then we heated up the oven, put the VHF in there, and we cooked it to sort of moderate gas for whatever it was for a while, and got it out, and it was nice and warm, and it was dry, and we plugged it in. It worked. Didn't work all that well because the area at the top of the mast was bent over 90 degrees, so the mast had tipped in. So I said to Edward Heath, can we have a list? Let's get a list, and of all the numbers of the nearest and dearest. And I said, I'll ring Andrea and give her the list, and she can ring everybody because this thing's cutting in and out a bit, and it's, pretty dodgy. It's been soaked. So what I'll do is I'll ring Andrea, give her the list of people, all the girlfriends and wives and what have you. And he said, well, I'd like my I think his mother. He wanted to talk to his mother or his mother's friend or his auntie. He obviously wasn't married, but he had somebody he wanted to talk to. And he gave the number to get her, so he's first on the list. And then I took all the numbers of everybody, so I had 8 more numbers there to call. And I through Portishead, you had to do it through Portishead at the time, got to Portishead, so there's this morning cloud, urgent message from Edward Heath, Sir Edward Heath. That got me in the front of the queue. Andrea's number, rang Andrea. So I said, hello, Andrea. Where on earth have you been? She said. You don't know. We've been worried sick about you. She said, you don't consider us. You go out there sailing, and we're worried, and the kids are worried. So Edward Heath got the microphone. He said, excuse me, Andrea, might I trouble you to ring my mother's friend or some damn thing? He said, and Andrea said, yes, sir. So I gave the numbers, and she rang everybody. Anyway.
Brilliant.
So that was that bit. Dear old Chris had gone below. He wouldn't come up, and he said, can I do the navigation, David? And I said, well, you can do, yeah, if you like. I don't mind. I'll come down and talk you through it. And he wouldn't come up. He'd been sort of traumatised, and he wouldn't come on deck at all. He sat below, and of course, after the storm passed, the sun shone, and we got all our clothes off and standing around in underpants, and it's August, and all the gear hanging out to dry and everything because it all wet through. Couldn't get Chris out of there, and so we finished, and we moved into Melbourne Docks and went alongside, and it's traditional that there's a party on arrival because you've done 80 or 90 hours sailing around, and you've got around the Fastnet, and there's a party. And the Admiral's Cup usually is brought out, and they fill it with champagne and have a little drink out of it. So they made us start on this party, and then the Dutch frigate, the Overijssel, came in, and the Overijssel had been through the worst of the weather with a big English yacht called Morningtown, and been rescuing people. With the helicopters were rescuing people as well. And the over-ice had rescued quite a few people and picked up 3 bodies, I think, or 4 bodies. So she came in and docked next to us in Mel Bay Dock. We're all sort of getting this arrival party going. And then they lowered the gangway and they started bringing down the bodies covered in red ensigns. And the party sort of fizzled out a bit after that. It's damped their spirits a bit. So that was the...
So was that the first moment that you knew that...
Oh, no. In that logbook, I've got notes that I got off the radio. It's all in scribbled pencil, but, 5 drowned, sort of 9 rescued, 3 boats gone into Cork. I was getting these things off the radio, but it's scribbled in there because we're still in rough weather. The other thing to say about the 79 Fastnet was there's an organisation called MOCRA, which is the Multi-Hull Racing Association, MOCRA. And the Royal Ocean Racing Club, which ran the Fastnet race, would not let them take part in the Fastnet. They said that their trimarans and catamarans weren't seaworthy enough. So MOCRA always sent one of their boats round. And this year, 79, that year, they sent a boat called Buck's Fizz with 4 people on board round with the Fastnet. 3 of them in the boat they never found at all. They found bits of the boat and 1 body, I think, a fortnight later. And that's why if you look up the Fastnet, you'll see they say 15 drowned, which is true. But there were also 4 in Buck's Fizz that drowned as well, which brings you up to 19, which is the number I was quoting. So I say that I think it was a catamaran, trimaran, 3 hulls. And as I say, they found 1 bit with a name on it, I think, but the rest and 3 of the crew members were never found. And rather proved the Rourke's point, really. They weren't quite up to it, although plenty of conventional boats sank. And that's the story of the Fastnet. And funny old Heath, actually.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, David. You must have some other great stories about Ted Heath. I'm still trying to get a vision out of my head of you and Ted Heath standing around in your underpants on the deck of Morning Cloud, but...
I can't remember that bit. I don't think he got quite as wet because he didn't come up top, you see. He stayed below. And flying across the cabin, he bashed himself very hard, bashed his leg, which is why I had to sew it up. And he never came on deck. I don't think he got wet through. Bear in mind, we're all in pretty good oilskins and sea boots and things, so if you're going to sit up there and be completely submerged every sort of 5 or 6 minutes, you're going to get wet. But if you're down below in oilskins, you probably just your sleeves round your neck, bit down the front, and I can't remember Edward Heath ever getting down to his underpants anyway.
While you were sailing with him, did he talk much about his career and life and Margaret? Very seldom. Normally ashore, he kept his security man, and the next season we sailed and the races in the Med. We all went down the Med, and he kept his security man, and they used to look after him a lot. It's indeed his crew did, and we used to go ashore for dinner and things like that. And if you came out, there'd be a driver, and we'd have 2 security men with us. Forget their names, police, special duties police people, and they always carried a Smith & Wesson gun, because I remember in Sardinia we were sitting on the beach and everybody's in bathing costumes and they're still dressed, and we said, well, why don't you go and have a swim? We'd look after your gun for you, but they didn't do that. Don't worry, we'll put it under here and sit on it. But they were very good. They were very clever, you see. I remember coming out of one cafe that we'd been to, or one restaurant, and there were a whole gang of sort of
semi-teenage, what you used to call in the old days, teddy boys, you know. People used to sort of damp down a bit in the first day or two at sea, and they started coming up and started jeering in Edward Heath's face. And I always remember one of the security blokes, and what he did, he walked up to him, he planted his 2 feet on this guy's 2 feet and just gave him a little push about the neck, and this guy couldn't lift his feet, of course, so he went splat. The others all backed off thoughtfully. They're very good at that sort of stuff. But I'll tell you one little story about Edward Heath. 3 months before he died, we had a big dinner at the Royal Southern, and the dinner was for the Morning Cloud crew of 79. Now, I forget when he died, but it was about 2000, give or take a year or so either way. You could look up when he died, and it was 3 or 4 months before that. Edward Heath was going to give a speech. The Commodore of the club was going to give a speech. And after I'd had about 3 whiskies, they said, who's going to give a speech from Morning Cloud's crew? Because Morning Cloud's crew were all there. Without a shadow of hesitation, they said, David is. And I thought, that's a good start. I've got 10 minutes to sort of sort it out. So I told the story of the cocoa, you see. So the only time I ever really got mad at an ex-Prime Minister and embellished it a bit, like I've told you. And then it was Heath's turn. And he wanted to talk about what I now understand as AI, but he regarded as the electronic revolution and how dangerous it was to mankind. And none of us really cottoned on to what he was saying. What's the matter with, we can send email, we can print stuff out, we've got a fax machine and, all the stuff you had and the thing that goes, to get onto the broadband of its day. Nothing dangerous about that. It's just like a swept-up TV set. Well, of course, he's dead right. I mean, now, 20-odd years after his death, he's now being proved that AI, was saying the dangers of AI. What happens if he gets brighter than the humans and all this business? Very, very prescient. And as I say, there weren't a lot of people who cottoned on to that, and I was one of them, but I do now. I understand what he's on about. He was a clever bloke.
So when you were sailing, what did you talk about then? Not a lot, I don't think. I was a bit separate because I was on a chart table. Mainly weather forecasts. We used to make up our own forecasts because they gave the pressures at each location, at the Channel Islands and Channel Light Vessel and all the. And so we used to write the pressures down, and you could construct a bit of a pressure graph to illustrate where the fronts were and how they were moving in. And used to talk about that quite a lot, the navigation. But we're on watches, trying to get a bit of sleep. And you always had to be on the high side, of course. So if they tacked, all the sleepers were roused and moved across, which didn't add to the geology. I suppose the only other thing, the following year I didn't do it, and then in 95 I shipped on Victory, which was navigating Peter de Savary, and we actually won the thing. We sailed in there and we got a gun. I mean, this 40-odd foot boat getting a gun in the Fastnet. That was for the 70-footers, of course, because if you won on corrected time. And American boat was in, a 70-footer. I forget who it belonged to, or one that married Jane Fonda for a while. Anyway. Turner.
Yeah, Ted Turner, that's the man. So he came in Fizz first boat in, so he got the first gun. Wasn't necessarily the winner, of course, because he was a 70 or 80 foot boat. And we were second boat in, 40 foot boat. We got a gun. And a boat called Condor, which was also a big boat, was third boat in, got a gun. They thought they were first in. They got the third gun, they came, and we was alongside Ted Turner's boat. And they said, what happened to you? Do you retire? No, we finished the race, got the second gun. That upset them no end, of course. And we had to shift to third boat out because we were too small for them to berth against. But no, we won the Fastnet. It was very good, actually.
Wow.
Well,
David, that has been an incredible load of stories you've given me there. I'm really looking forward to listening back and editing.
Yeah,
that.
You've been on for a long time. You'll need a.
We have been on for a while. Well, no, I appreciate your stamina. The episode extras, such as videos, photos, and other content, are available via a link in the episode information. The podcast wouldn't exist without the generous efforts of our financial supporters, and I'd like to thank one and all of them for keeping the podcast on the road. The Cold War conversation continues in our Facebook discussion group. Just search for Cold War Conversations in Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and look forward to seeing you next week.